everybody. Welcome to the EvoSec podcast. This is Aaron Davis, and I've got my co-host Eric Davis, my twin brother. We are the Tactical Twins. How you doing, Eric?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I'm a little sore today.
I know why. Maybe we can talk about that later.
Yeah, maybe so. But I'm feeling good. A little bit of weight off of my shoulders, so I'm good to go. Really glad to be on the show tonight with you guys.
Well, good deal. Well, we are honored to have Rich Brown on from the American Warrior Society and the American Warrior Show. I'll tell you what, him and Mike are probably the people that got me into podcast listening, not into podcasting, but listening to podcasts. And we had Rich on episode number 7. But man, we're just so stoked to have you back, Rich. You're just such a good friend, and you've been so supportive of us, and it's just been awesome. And again, great to have you again. How you doing?
Good, Aaron, and thanks for having me on, guys. I always love chatting with you guys, and I'm humbled that Mike and I have been part of your journey.
Oh, that can't be overstated. Seriously, when I got turned on to your guys' show, I mean, I was one of the people that was like, man, they need to come out with shows more often. I go through them too fast. I remember that driving down the highway, listening to you guys and just enjoying the heck out of it and learning. Eric, you going to say something, brother?
Yeah, I just wanted to add again, kind of in the same realm, is that also your guys' influence, along with a couple of other sources, are also why we're even doing this show as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, your guys' influence is really big in our lives, man. Thank you very much, Rich.
Well, thanks. I tell you what, you guys have an amazing show, and from the guests that you have on to the weekly accountability piece that you guys discuss, I think it's so refreshing that another group of reasonable, responsible, logical men are putting on this kind of content. So hats off to you guys.
Thanks a lot, Rich.
Man, amazing. Thank you very much. Well, Rich, for listeners that may not know you, could you go ahead and give our listeners some information about who you are and what you're up to?
Sure. I've been married for 34 years to my high school sweetheart, the lovely and ever ravishing Miss Lisa. And we have 4 amazing kids. I did 23 years in the Marine Corps, the first 7 of it in the infantry, did 3 deployments. One was a combat deployment. Taught at the School of Infantry for 3 years, taught military operations and urban terrain, weapons, tactics, close combat, blah, blah, blah. Got out of the Marine Corps, was a corrections officer, special operations officer, and then I went over and was a patrol officer with the city. Pardon me. And then I realized that policing was not for me. I thought it was. I was honor graduate out of my corrections academy class, president of my class. I went to the police academy where I was honor graduate yet again and president of my class. And I thought, man, I was born to do this. And of course, that being a cop is not what I thought it was going to be. And I left, went back to the Marine Corps, retired. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was a regional manager for disaster preparedness with the American Red Cross. And then around 2015, my best friend since 1990 came to me and said, hey, man, this guy named Mike Seeklander, he says, I'm wanting to start this thing called the American Warrior Society. Matter of fact, I think at that point he was working on getting the trademark for it, but he had only talked to me and I think 1 or 2 other folks about it. And asked me, I think, do you want to be a part of it and help me like monitor some of the forums? Shows you how long ago it was. Forums were a thing. And I said, sure, man. And he's like, what do you think about doing a podcast? And so anyway, 7 years later, here we are. And that's one of the things I do as well, is adjunct firearms and trainer with Mr. Seeklander with his company, shooting performance. I co-authored a book with him on the art of instruction, and we teach that to law enforcement and open enrollment classes across the country. So that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is not just the podcast that we've done together and the amazing people we've met along the way, but I think that the course that we've put together is a pretty good one, and I'm really proud of it.
Well, and Rich, that is the top of our list, is getting into your guys' instructor development class. Maybe we can talk offline. Maybe we can make that happen in either one of our locations. But yeah,
Yeah, I'd love to.
one of my favorite shows, and maybe you've done a couple of them. Forgive me if I misremember, but yeah, you guys have done some excellent shows on instructing and how to be an excellent instructor. I mean, I'll do diligence and look up those episodes and put them in the show notes for sure for our audience members that may have
Well,
not heard them.
it's funny. I had a note here to make sure I brought that up because that was one of my favorite episodes you guys had. I mean, it was ridiculous how much knowledge and wisdom you guys demonstrated on that show, and that's the thing that made me, man, I have to take one of their instruction classes someday too. So maybe we can talk about that later in the show, or I'm offline. Sounds awesome.
It's funny.
Well,
Mike and
go
I
ahead,
taught
Rich.
our first open enrollment class in 1995. It was a 2-day civilian defensive handgun class in the summer of 1995. So in the last 27 years, I couldn't tell you how many of these type classes we've taught to open enrollment as well as law enforcement and military groups across the country.
Well, it's certainly something that a lot of folks that are either teaching or in this path with us, it is becoming more and more understood that folks need to seek that type of training out. And I may be just misunderstanding the industry from just kind of being engrossed in it now over the years, but it did seem like years ago that there just was not near as much the desire to continue to go out and improve upon teaching capabilities in the firearms industry like it is now. And I may be wrong on that, but it does seem like, and we've had other mentors on this show, Tom Givens specifically, that talks about how excellent of a time it is right now for training, that we're kind of in the best of times and in the worst of times as well, as he puts it. But yeah, you
He ain't
guys
wrong.
definitely
He ain't wrong.
Yeah, yeah. The proliferation of information, how easy it is to become an influencer, which I'm thinking about recently, some comments I've seen at one of our mentors, Craig Douglas, say online that, how easy it is to be an influencer, and actually the antithesis of that is actually training people. So there's a lot of people out there that aren't training people, that are easily getting the bright lights of YouTube and even podcasting, that may not be qualified to do so. And I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not saying we're all that either. We're new in this. But what do you just your thoughts on that? There's a lot of ease to be able to get out there and influence people when folks may not be the experts that they really should be.
No, you're absolutely right. And I, again, having trained some of the best in the law enforcement community, it's a mixed bag, right? So this is the tip of the spear kind of folks within our law enforcement community, and they're not always where they should be. Just an hour and a half ago, I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine who's a former SOCOM guy. And I won't say what unit he was with, but he was telling me that he got asked to come out and train a SWAT team. And the intent was that he was going to show them this drill, teach them the value of it, and kind of walk them through it, and leave the rest of the training up to the SWAT team commander, who was supposed to be their lead trainer. And the training was horrific. He was like, "What is this guy telling them?" It was. I won't go into some of the specifics, but it speaks to the point that you're making. And like one of the things you were saying, that one of the SWAT guys was holding, it was a Glock 34 with some sort of weapon mounted light on it, and he was holding the light like you would hold the handguard of a AR type system. And it was
wow.
Yeah, it's just mind boggling.
A SWAT team member, huh?
Yeah. And I say that because we started the American Warrior Society, and full disclosure, it is a paid membership site. But the information you're getting is, say that again.
Oh, excellent site.
Oh,
everybody needs to become a Coin member if they are not.
There you go. Anyway,
there you go.
YouTube's
mine's
free.
Next to my bed. I'll go grab it.
But YouTube's free, and you get what you pay for. So not every piece of information is vetted, and that's one of the reasons why inside the website we created the Preparedness series. I kept searching YouTube for what are people out there putting the teaching and training on. What is a go bag, get home bag, SHIT hits the fan bag, whatever you want to call it. And it was terrible, horrific information, or it was just completely nonsensical. So I'm like, Mike, we're going to have to add another series to the training vault on how to pack and prepare a go bag. So as the need arises, we continue to build modules like that just to give folks, because I'm having led and managed disasters as a member of the Red Cross and traveled around the world like you guys have. I've carried some form of kit bag, and I've been armed. I've carried concealed all over Europe. But when I was in my early 20s, before I knew it was a crazy thing to be able to carry concealed in France. But yeah, so to go back to your point, yeah, there's a lot of people that have podcasts. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are giving their opinion. I hear some of it, and I bang my head against the wall and go, this is terrible information. But how do you stop it? You don't.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, those in the industry that are the actual experts, our mentors, you guys, at some point, there's still the Dunning-Kruger effect that we can never seem to get past. It's something very, very fascinating to me is why that still continues to take place. And I've told this story multiple times. Again, since we're talking about one of the precipitations of us doing this venture was your guys' show, and then a time when you guys had Carl Wren on the show. Incidentally, Aaron and I were just at Carl Wren's range in Texas outside of Austin, taking the Range Master Advanced Instructor class, and it was really cool to meet him. And I told him in person, I think we told him this on the air, but his book, and I'm gonna misstate the exact name of the book, but essentially he was discussing, him and John Dobbs, about getting people past the 1%. Mm-hmm. And on your guys' show, he said, if you have some modicum of expertise and you're not sharing it, you're doing the community a disservice. And Carl's a blunt guy. He was blunt several times when we were in some discussions, kind of another subject, but that kind of was a very much a catalyst for us doing this as well. So with that said, Rich, I kind of want to segue partially here. That's the biggest reason we had you on the show. Number one, we needed to do this a long time ago, but your expertise in disaster preparedness. And I really want to mention to the audience members out there that your shows that you've been doing on emerging threats are outstanding. I mean, it's tough to find better amalgamated information than what I've heard on those episodes. So very much thank you for putting those out there, and for the audience out there, I'm going to place. Um, I'll just try to go find the bulk of those shows and place them in the show notes if that's okay with you, Rich.
Yeah, you can post our YouTube channel as well. I'll send
Absolutely,
you that link, Eric.
Roger. No problem. Now, just this last episode, episode 298 of the American Warrior Society, it's simply called Prepare. And man, I listened to that. What was it? 2 days ago, a day ago, and like one of the listeners said, it's like, man, I'm driving, I can't write notes, so I'm going to listen to that again and write some additional notes because it's that valuable information. But that was one of the things that made me want to ask you back on. But I would like to start before we move into the possibility of hard times as a discussion is the good news of the Supreme Court finding that essentially the Second Amendment protects our abilities to go figure, keep and bear arms. Bear in the vernacular of the time meant to carry, right? Mm-hmm. So, but to have that codified in a Supreme Court opinion is huge. What are your thoughts on that?
I love it. I mean, if you go back to Columbia versus Heller in 2008, where the court upheld the right of the individual to possess a firearm for self-defense in their home, right? And then you had McDonald versus Chicago. The court rules that, the cities and states can't limit your ability to keep and bear arms any more than the federal government can, which is to not infringe it. I think this one is the trifecta, right? This is that third thing. So now you can't be limited. I can have one in my home and I can carry it outside the home. So it is a huge victory for the Second Amendment, man.
Yeah, it is tough to be. I mean, there is no ambiguity in Justice Clarence Thomas' opinion. I mean, so just real quick. I mean, I've got it in my hand, at least this portion of the opinion. I'm still making it through the full opinion, to be honest, but I've read a good bulk of it. But this is amazing on page 62 of New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen. The constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense is not a second-class right, subject to an entirely different body of rules than the other Bill of Rights guarantees. We know of no other constitutional right that an individual may exercise only after demonstrating to government officials some special need. That is not how the First Amendment works when it comes to unpopular speech or the free exercise of religion. It is not how the Sixth Amendment works when it comes to defendant's right to confront the witness against him. And it is not how the Second Amendment works when it comes to public carry for self-defense. And essentially saying that the New York's proper clause requirements violates the 14th Amendment. And I'll read the rest of it. It's not necessarily as relevant, but I love this part. It is so ordered that, yeah, I was pumped up when I read that. But
well, guys, yeah. as we're sitting there, as I'm listening to you say that, I keep going back to, and it happened after Heller. The left keeps saying, and FYI, I'm sure a lot of our listeners have heard a lot about this case, so we won't belabor it, but I do at least want to comment on the fact that so many anti-gunners love to say that they've changed the way we've known the Second Amendment to be, or how it applies to people. they've completely changed it in the last 15 years. To me, these are really the only major rulings on the Second Amendment in, since 1791, I believe, is when the Bill of Rights was ratified. Um, why do you guys think that is? Is it to me? It's like, well, everybody knew what it was until it started getting distorted. What are you guys' thoughts on that? What about you, Rich?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack in that question. And I think you're right. In the 21st century, we don't use the word regulated in the context that they use it in the 18th century America. This is one of the confusions, even within the gun community, that regulated means the government can put regulations. That's not at all what the framers meant the word to be. Well disciplined, well armed, well equipped, etc. So yeah, there's that misunderstanding. There's the misunderstanding that all men 16 to 60 served in some militia body, and they had to be able to keep arms in order to serve in that militia. The framers were terrified about standing armies because, hell, they had just fought one, and they didn't want to go back to that. A third and final confusion, I think, is the sense that that the Second Amendment came out of nowhere, which is not the case at all. The 8 states that already had some form of Bill of Rights or already had, their Constitution was well codified. They all had the right to keep and bear arms, almost worded similar to the 27 words that comprise the Second Amendment. So it's one of the things, matter of fact, if you look at the papers between the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists when they're putting together the Bill of Rights, there was really no argument about it. It was just completely understood as to what it means, which is exactly what you just said. Everybody understood it until the 20th century and the infringement of those rights.
Well, and I also love that in this opinion that Thomas essentially says, and this is the citizen has the right, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, citizen has the right to carry arms in public, not just those serving in the militia. I think that was important to state that because he's really dropping the bomb on that argument that, hey, it was meant to be for the militia, when we know that just like you stated, that the militia was of the citizenry because our founding fathers didn't want a standing army, as you stated, or a military. Well said, Rich. Yeah, I think it's great. I think what's unfortunate, however, is you got states like New York and California, is those citizens are likely going to continue to have to fight this battle in court because you got the governor in New York already saying that, hey, she's going to work with the legislature to restrict where people can carry. So, I made the joke. It's like, I bet she's going to hope to get essentially a law that says, hey, you cannot carry in crowds greater than 2. It's like, that's the kind of stuff that they do.
And the fight will continue to rage on. And here's the way I always look at it. It's overly simplistic. I understand it, but it would seem to me that states and cities where they've made it incredibly difficult for the law-abiding American citizen to possess and carry firearms, if those were the safest places in the country, I'd be like, anecdotally, I see where you're coming from. However, it's not. These are the most dangerous, violent places in our society. So
absolutely,
it makes no sense.
And they blame out of town, out of state firearms on it. And they're so illogical. Yeah. And I'll just say this, and we can move on. But the fact is that they really conflate that hold on a second here, guys. They really conflate that law-abiding citizens are the problem. That anyone else, the more people carrying, the more dangerous it's going to be. It's just like, what the? you automatically become a criminal because you can carry a gun. I don't know. It's mind boggling.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what we'll see is what we've likely seen in every other area where shell issues started to develop in the 90s, that hopefully we're going to start to see crime reduce in these states if the restrictions, some restrictions are going to have to be lifted. I mean, just by the decision alone. I mean, I'll just mention New Jersey just relieved their restrictions and are turning their law into a more shell issue. So that's already a good sign. They did it like the day after. So with New Jersey's doing it, I think you're going to see a lot of these anti-carry states start to fall. Hopefully,
Well, New
we
Jersey's
can only hope.
New Jersey's near and dear to my heart because for the last several years, Mike Seeklander and I have gone to New Jersey and trained an amazing group of federal law enforcement officers. But once we arrive in that state, it gets weird. Like no more than a 10-round magazine. No, what is the other one? You can't have hollow point ammunition. And when we travel from the location to train with these federal agents to their property that they control from our hotel room, the gun's got to be locked in a box and all this kind of stuff in the trunk of the car. Who follows those arbitrary rules? Good guys. Scumbags don't follow those rules. That's just the nature of the business. All you're doing is disarming me. And again, why am I even in New Jersey? I'm here to train law enforcement. You'd think there'd be some sort of workaround, but there's not. I'm just as disarmed as every single other New Jersey citizen. So, and I'm heading off to California in a couple of weeks to teach a defensive handgun class. I don't own 10-round magazines. I've got to go borrow a Gen 3 Glock so I can legally teach the class. And I'm trying to buy 10-round magazines, but I ordered them like 3 months ago and they still haven't come in because they're in back order. So I may have to borrow magazines
Rich,
when I get there. It's crazy.
Is it? Are you using a 17?
Yes.
I can ship you out. I think I have about at least 4 10-rounders. I'll ship them to you, man.
Yeah, I may need it. I mean,
like.
It's coming up in like 2 weeks, and if I don't get them from the company I order from, I may have to do that.
No, man, I'll do it preemptively. I'll write a note here. We'll talk offline, and I'll get them shipped to you, buddy.
But doesn't it make our point though that, and it's an interesting one. I just got done reading an amazing book on the Second Amendment. I wish I could remember it, but one of the things that the framers referenced was this guy, Cesare Beccaria, the father of modern criminology. Have you guys heard of this guy?
I believe I have. It's been a little bit, but yes.
Yeah, he says false is the idea of utility that sacrifices 1,000 real advantages for one imaginary or trifling inconvenience. That would take fire from men because it burns, and water because one may drown in it. That has no remedy for evils except destruction. The laws that forbid the carrying of arms are laws of such a nature. They disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. And it goes on and on, but it's precisely what we're talking about. This was 1764.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and so no, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to get that quote for sure, or get the book. Better yet, I'll get that from you offline. Well, we state this fairly often, is that depending on what numbers you look at, we see an area of between 250,000 or 500,000, upwards of 2.5 million people saved a year by firearms, and 85% or so of the time the trigger does not even have to be pulled. So again, this hysteria around, like New York's governor, essentially saying, oh, the Supreme Court is gonna cause death in the streets, which we know is just hyperbole and completely false. So,
and did you hear her say that the Second Amendment protected muskets? And hey, I would love to go back to muskets.
Yep.
Do they, and just think of the irony of that. They say they don't want us to have, quote, military grade weapons. Hey, the musket was the state of the art military rifle of the time. Are they
Yeah.
that dumb?
My buddy,
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, my buddy Taylor Rudd. He's a former Marine and he's an American War Society member. And he's a police officer now. He's got an amazing YouTube channel called Defenders and Disciples. His position is, if the purpose of the Second Amendment is twofold, number one, to alter or abolish the government, and number two, the second purpose is for self-defense. I mean, the courts have upheld those two things as I believe the framers wanted it. But if that's the case, then if I'm supposed to have the ability as a citizen of this country to alter or abolish the government, then I need to be able to have the arms to alter or abolish the government. Meaning, I need to have the
Absolutely.
standard loadout for a rifleman or a police officer, which is, I would surmise, a patrol rifle, call it an AR-15 or whatever, and some sort of
Mm-hmm.
semi-automatic handgun and body armor. And to me, that just makes
Yeah,
logical sense.
absolutely. We like to say that the AR-15 is a modern musket.
It is.
It just is, and that is the real intent behind the Second Amendment, was the abilities to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government. The left does not like that. Now, we are not advocating that is a solution currently. Not at all. Our solutions are purely political right now. But most assuredly, that was the primary reason for the Second Amendment.
I think it's comical too.
Excellent.
I think it's comical too, Eric, in a day when we've given $54 billion of American treasure to the Ukraine in the form of assault weapons to fight a tyrannical invasion, that you could look at me with a straight face and say, "Oh no, it's not really that. You don't really need those." Well, of course you need those. It's the first thing Zelensky did, right?
And there's a lot of folks that are left leaning or on the Democrat side of the aisle that were all for arming Ukraine, right? And again, let's just point back to what we did in Afghanistan. We left billions, and boy, I'd be remiss if I didn't remember the exact figure, but it was $63 billion worth of armament that we left in Afghanistan.
At least.
And it's amazing that, again, armament well above the standard civilian capabilities here in the United States. But anyway, we certainly can go on and on about that. It's very, very important. But some of this contributes to our intended discussion. And Rich, that is, are we in the possibility of hard times? And so I just like to state this. I should have this memorized. I say it pretty often, but I'm going to start with a little bit of a quote. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And I see that attributed to Michael Hoff, is the source that I've seen, and there's various permutations of that. But I mean, that is a truism. Would you agree, Rich?
Well, it certainly seems to be the case. I'd wonder if anybody's put any intellectual rigor to it, but anecdotally, I absolutely concur with that.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to look at it, is that it is anecdotal. But I mean, I look at cycles of history, and you're much more of a history buff than myself. But you only have to look at, I mean, a good example might even be just going as early back to the Great Depression, and how individuals, how they figured out how to live during hard times. And then we came out of the Great Depression, where our economy started to build up again, and you had a lot of hard men that then moved into World War II, so on and so forth. And I believe that that time frame was what facilitated good times that we've had in recent times. I know it's multivariate. I understand that. But right now, in juxtapose, is that now we've had such good times in the last several decades that we've seen a trend towards, I'll just use the term, a trend towards American Marxism and really anti-constitutional both laws and policies that, I mean, we're seeing come to fruition, some hard times possibly coming. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I am very comforted by what I've seen the last couple of weeks in the Supreme Court with those two,
Yes,
the Roe versus Wade
absolutely.
decision, and of course the Second Amendment. But on the whole, globally, I think you're absolutely right. If we look at the potential ramifications of the war in the Ukraine and where that could take the world and America, will we feel it? I don't know. Some, not as much as the developing countries, but we will have some hard times here. And there's an interesting book speaking to the cycles that you were referencing. It's called The Storm Before the Calm. And I can't remember who wrote it, but it's an interesting book because it talks about these social cycles and these cultural cycles within America and how they run on different courses. And we're at the end of one right now. And it talks about how, and it was written several years ago, and it talks about this is going to be tumultuous up until, I think the author said 2028 to 2032. And then we'll come out of it and we'll have a period of peace and prosperity. So I'm looking forward to that. But we're going to have to go through some pain to get there.
Well, and Rich, what I would really like to make sure that I really emphatically state is that I'm not a doom or gloom person. I think the three of us sitting right here across from each other virtually are not doom and gloom, because we believe in our current system of government, which is, a constitutional republic, and also believe in the grit of the American, which we still have, regardless of what we see in the media, and regardless of what we see in Washington. So I believe that we can absolutely come out of this. I don't think that this is a impending doom, not at all. But I just have to sit there and think about some of the factors, or excuse me, the statistics we're seeing. 2020 annual inflation was 1.4%. In 2021, we jumped to 7%. In 2022, we are now currently at 8.6% inflation. And I'm not an economist, but I also believe that the current way that inflation is calculated may not be really the actual inflation rate. And
Well,
go
and I
ahead,
can
Aaron.
chime in there. Yes, it is. I mean, most people know this, but it's frankly, it's cooking the books on the behalf of the government. They weight certain things and how they weight, especially energy pricing, so it doesn't. It makes it less volatile. The CPI, the Consumer Price Index, is what we're talking about.
Roger.
And yeah, it's hilarious that they've made it to where they can pat themselves on the back, that it's better than what people really realize. But hey, we've known that it sure has felt way worse than 8% for a long time. So
Certainly. And a few other figures, and I'll bring you in on this, Rich. So in November of 2020, and I state that for an obvious reason, that was during the election, right? Gas average price was $2.20, and now, currently in June of 2022, average price of gasoline is $5.03. Now, I want to be careful. We're in the summer now, so I know people can argue that I'm comparing apples to oranges, but all you have to do is look at the chart of when gas prices started to rise was right after the election and up till now. And so we got fuel prices in that range, and I should have came with better statistics on the current cost of food. But if you just average out food costs right now, depending on where you look, you're seeing costs between 8, 9, 10% average increase. There's some products that are upwards of 30% increase. I've also seen figures that the average cost to a family for the year is going to be an additional $5,500. And
Yeah,
I don't
that's what
know
I've
too
seen
many.
too.
I don't know too many people that are in the, let's just say, use their terms, middle class, that's easy to swallow. So these are just some of the economic indicators that we may be going in the wrong direction. I know I said a lot there, Rich, but I mean, yeah. Look, your thoughts on just the economic impact?
Well, I think it's interesting to, because I've done shows. If you go back to like March of 2020, I did a show called Economic Collapse when we started printing
Oh yeah,
trillions and trillions of dollars. And there's a really good website called Shadow Stats. Have you guys heard of that one?
No,
from
I
you,
haven't. Okay.
from you.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
the consumer price index, as you said, it's this weighted conglomeration of a whole lot of different prices that affect consumer, right? And one of the things that they do, they cook the books, as you clearly said, and you're absolutely spot on. Because as things get weighted differently and it starts causing the inflation to rise, they just pull that thing out and add something else in to reduce it artificially. And even with their new consumer price index, we're looking at around 8.6%. According to Shadow Stats, if you calculated the CPI using the same things that used to be in it back in the 80s and 90s, you would be at almost 17% inflation.
Wow.
17%. So it's huge. And as you put, most of that is rising fuel and food costs. And we haven't even seen the end of that. It's going to get, again, I don't want to be doom and gloom. It's going to get way worse over the next, 12 to 18 months. And we could talk about
Well, and
why if you like.
we currently. Oh yeah, most assuredly, I'd like you to hit on that. Yeah, food shortage. So yeah, go ahead and hit on that on how your thoughts on how it's going to proceed now.
Well, there's a lot of people that will send me like this food processing plant burned down, or this one was shuttered, and all these things. Or Smithfield Foods, our largest pork producer, is owned by China. Yes, those things are happening in the background. However, I think what's really affecting a lot of this is the war in Ukraine and the fact that most of the fertilizer comes from Russia and China. And when we can't get access to the fertilizer, if I have a small garden here on our farm in East Tennessee. If I only use 60% of the fertilizer that I used last year, then I can reasonably expect to get 60% of the crop yields, right? I mean, it's math. So as fertilizer gets harder to get, and the world has already been hit by the Ukrainian wheat shortage, and I had Dr. Cronin on the show, who's a professor in international politics. One of the things that he said is, even if they tried to get the grain into Poland, which they can't, the railroads are different. They're like 4-inch difference or something like that. So you can't even bring grain cars in. There's a whole lot of reasons why we're going to see this. Now, America, we don't import Ukrainian grain. So like, well, why are we even talking about it? Because of the strain it's going to put on the developing world. I would venture a guess that if I looked at your budget, your family budget, you're spending anywhere between 6 and 10% of your family's income on your food, and that's pretty much
Mm-hmm.
standard here in America. But if you look at the developing world, we're talking about anywhere from 70 to 90%. So it's literally going to price people out of purchasing food. And what is that? What are the ramifications of that? Well, we saw Somalia, right? And people are starving. We've seen what happens before historically. The unrest, the Arab Spring started because of bread prices. So, are we looking at another Arab Spring or something worse in Somalia? I would say, yeah, we are, and just brace for it. It may not be in America. Your Chick-fil-A sandwich, might cost you more, or they're not going to have, you're not going to get 3 pieces of bacon on your cheeseburger, right? It's going to be 1 or 2, but we're still going to have the fat of the land here. But for most of the world, they're looking at really hard times to come.
Well, and Rich, I'll say a few other kind of points, just adding to the discussion here, and then I'll kind of hit on a point that Aaron and I were talking about maybe yesterday or the day before. Is add to this circumstance, we saw from 2019 to 2020 a 29% increase in murder, and that was from the FBI's UCR, which I always like this, make sure that I say this. The UCR is voluntary data. So that number of 29% may be quite a bit higher or a bit higher. And then I've seen various numbers from a few other sources that since 2019 up until now that we're seeing in the larger cities, like I believe it was 22 cities from the CCCJ, that it's more like 44% increase in murder in these large cities. So and I think a lot of that's caused by the defund the police and all COVID probably had something to do with it, but I think mainly it's the vilification of law enforcement, all of that, which we can definitely get into as well. But you mentioned the war in Ukraine, energy energy grid. You've mentioned that on emerging threats. The energy grid, we have folks on the green side of politics saying that, hey, we need to move away from fossil fuels. We need to move to electric vehicles and move everybody into mass transit. But you know when what is it, somewhere around 60% of the current grid is some form of fossil fuel, or something in roughly in that area. Folks that are plugging in their electric vehicle don't realize that they're charging their vehicle probably with fossil fuels. Um, Cyber attacks, all of this can contribute to what Aaron and I were talking about, is that we are so used to good times that we're folks take for granted that it's always going to be that way. And Aaron, you kind of hit it really well, about, hey, how quickly that could change. Go ahead and state what you said the other day. I thought it was a good way of putting it.
Well, just that, just even back up to the fact that, I mean, everybody knows that the United States is a very, very young country, and we've had it so good for so long, but people, for the most part, almost everybody assumes that things will basically always be essentially great or good. And even things like that will never be invaded, things like that. I know that's out of left field, but at the same time, that's always a possibility, whether that's in 100 years, 50 years, 200 years. But things will not always be the same as they are right now. And they could, as we know, change, with a pandemic like we had, and just throw the whole world for a loop, and it could get worse. But yeah, everybody assume that everything's always going to be the same, but we know it's not.
Well,
I, I,
and we can add. Go ahead, Rich.
I,
Sorry, buddy.
I find it comical when I hear Americans say well, we're not going to be invaded. It's so comical to me. It's like because I hear it all the time. It's like things of that nature. And it's like, you obviously don't know your history. The Japanese invaded Alaska during World War II. My grandfather, my mother's father, fought the Japanese in bloody pitched battles on Alaskan soil. Now, of course, at the time, I think it was a territory. It wasn't a state yet, but it still was American territory. Or Pancho Villa's raid into America in 1916, kidnapped 18 Americans and slaughtered them. And then he went into the small
Yeah.
town of Columbus, New Mexico, and took it over. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but this idea that it's not going to happen, it's ridiculous.
And it doesn't have to, you making that point about Pancho Villa invading just, north of their border, right? It doesn't have to be a major sustained invasion.
Right.
We've all seen that movie Red Dawn, right?
Mm-hmm.
when we were kids, but it could just be some crazy thing like that, and then the left would want us unarmed in a situation like that. That's another thing. A lot of us that are prepared with our rifles and that have been more prepared than a lot of people. We don't think we're going to go in an all-out war, but heck, I would like to be able to protect my house for an evening or two. If there was something crazy like that.
Yeah, and another one is that I always think of is most Americans don't know that the White House was burned almost to the ground in 1814
Mm-hmm.
during the War of 1812.
Absolutely.
And I found something interesting one time. I forget who the guest was, but they were up on the balcony with President Bill Clinton, and they looked around, and there's a black spot on the wall. They didn't have paint on it, and it's like, what is that? It's like, that's the charred remains of where this place was burned down. And every president since, it says, don't paint over that. That's a reminder of what can and will happen here again. And I think here in America, we have,
Awesome.
Wow.
and I'm not the one that said this, somebody else, some other historian said it. We have historical amnesia, and we need to wake up, or it's going to wake us up.
Well, and I think we make these points to just kind of hit on the fact that we need to make sure that we harden ourselves and harden our hearts, that there could be hard times. We pray and hope for that it does not happen, and I lean towards a higher percentage that it's not going to go bad, but there is too many factors that could contribute to hard times. And I just think people need to understand they at least need to do some kind of preparation. And also, let's face it, the other factor is, if you're an audience member and for some reason you believe in supporting Democrats, and we're going to talk more on this on another subject, or excuse me, another show, is we had one poor rating come up about, hey, drop the politics. Mm. Well, what we do related to liberty and self-protection absolutely is political. I've mentioned this before. The root word in politics is polis, right? Police is it has the root word of polis. So yes, politics have every bit to do with the citizen, but the point being is sometimes these cautionary discussions are about making sure that folks get themselves at least looking at the real solutions and how we can use our blessing as a free US citizen. We are still free, as tough as some of it is politically, we're still free, and we just need to make sure that we're doing the right thing when it comes to who we vote for, and getting involved both at the local, state, and national level, I think is also part of this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, look at the state of the UK. I mean, all of our laws were taken from English common law, and if you go back to the 1600s, I mean, men had to have, it was written into law. I think Henry VIII, all men had to have a chainmail, a pike, and a helmet or something like that. Had to at home. And now you fast forward and you can't even have a can of pepper spray at home. You can't even, they've outlawed pit bulls. I mean, anything that they could outlaw, they have. So yes, you can lose things,
including self-defense, basically.
Well, what did the French President Macron recently say? Are y'all familiar with that? There was a farmer who was home alone with his daughter. I think she was like 3 or 4. She's a very small little girl, and he lives in a rural area. And 4 men broke into his house, and he grabbed a shotgun and shot at him, or a rifle. I can't remember. Anyway, he shot and killed one of the 4 men that were attacking, while him and his little girl were home alone. And of course, he's being charged with murder. And Macron, the president of France, went on and said, you do not have the right to self-defense. That's what the police's job for, which opens the door for what is the role of police in America. And the role of police in America, folks, I hate to tell you, has nothing to do with your safety and security. The police, and I'm a former cop, the purpose for law enforcement is just that, to enforce the law. It is not to protect you. And there are multiple Supreme Court rulings on this very subject. We can talk about a few of them if you like, but most Americans see the bumper sticker, to protect and serve, Rich, that's your job. Absolutely not. The courts have affirmed again and again and again, they have no duty to protect you.
The public at large, right? I think is one of the phrases used. But I mean, again, that you are not guaranteed to be protected by police. I mean, that's just, like you said, it's been found in court, and it's, more importantly, it's found empirically throughout reality that when you need help, you're your own protector.
Yeah, the Supreme Court ruled on this case Levito brought against New York City. He sued NYPD because they didn't step in to save him. There was this guy, I think his name was Genman or something like that. He's on a stabbing spree in a subway, and he comes up with his knife, and there's 2 uniformed police officers that are in a secured area. I don't really know what a secured area means, but maybe they were behind glass on the subway. I don't know. And they don't come out when they see the guy with the knife. So he turns to one of the guys riding and says, "You're going to die," and stabs him in the head. They go down to the ground in the subway, and they're fighting and fighting over this knife. And Levito finally gets the knife away from his attacker. And only then did the NYPD come out from behind the secured area and take him into custody. So he sues the court, and the Supreme Court threw it out. And not because they didn't believe him, not because the cops lied on the stand, none of that. It was kicked out because, as I've already said, the police have zero duty to protect you. And then there's, I forget the woman's name. It was a Castle Rock case out in Colorado where she sued, and the courts again confirmed that the state has no duty to protect you against the problem that it did not create. So people need to realize that. Now, what does that mean to you? That's why you have the Second Amendment. You don't have the cops. They're not.
That's right.
That's not their job. You are your own self-defense.
Well, since it takes only, we know that it's kind of trite, but it takes about 3 to 5 seconds for a deadly encounter to occur, and probably takes 10 seconds for a home invasion. So yeah, people need to understand that. I said it. I have another question before I move to that. It's just a reminder of what's his name, Bill de Blasio. He was asked if people had a right to defend, that they should have a right to defend themselves with a firearm. and he would not answer the question. He kept saying that, well, New York has the most amazing police force in the country. That's what their job is, no. But I think we'll belabor that. But, Rich, I think what what could really help listeners now, we could have 2 or 3 shows about this, but just like how we can kind of prescribe to listeners if they're getting into the self-defense realm, hey, here's a few things you can start with your fitness, start with your situational awareness. Yes, start learning how to use a firearm, but there are other things that you can start literally today to prepare yourself and not overwhelm those individuals. What would you recommend at least people start looking into to prepare for possible hard times, or just even like we said, every now and then things can go bad, and what can they start with at least?
Man, that's such a wide question, and I love it in one sense, in that it gives me a wide aperture to go with, but it's also difficult at the same time, and that is everyone's situation is
Stan,
different.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a multivariable problem, of course, right? So it depends. If you have a high blood pressure and you're overweight, well, the number two preventable death in America is obesity and being overweight. So I would tell you, get in shape. If you're already in shape, but you don't even have a week's worth of food, then you probably need to get that. If you're in shape and you have a week's worth of food, then I'm going to tell you, you probably need to read a book like Left to Bang and start getting switched on with what situational awareness is. And you probably need to read Andrew Branca's book regarding, when, how, and where you can use force against another human being. Once you get past that, you need to start taking training. You need to train in combatives. As you, like you guys, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but do something. And then find out if carrying a concealed firearm is the right thing for you. If it's not, then what are you going to rely on? Because as you mentioned, the police are always going to be minutes behind. I mean, there's a recent video where a BJJ black belt held a guy down till the police showed up. What did it take? 15 minutes for them to show up? I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yep, I remember seeing that. Yep, sure
Well,
did.
so Rich, on that same type of um, applying that to these disasters that could possibly happen, since that's your expertise, not just self-defense, but actually moving away from the self-defense side, we're talking about how would you apply that same kind of cursory, hey, here's where you need to start to prepare for a disaster that's going to help you immediately, or it's the 80-20 approach, etc.
And possibly midterm or long term.
Yeah.
I know that's also widening it as well.
No, great questions. If we look at I'm going to start probably within the home, right? Home fires kill, like, on average almost 4,000 Americans a year and do like $15 billion worth of damage. So get a fire plan for your home. Check your smoke alarms, 10-year lithium batteries, have fire extinguishers, etc. Because you talking about wait times. Man, I'm out here in the country. I don't even know what kind of fire response I'd get, and they're going to have to bring their own water. There's no fire hydrants out here in the county. So I would say everybody talks about these sexy ways that we can harden our home and stuff like that, protect our castle, but really smoke and fire damage is a big killer. So yeah, I mean, when we talk about all hazards preparedness, I would start with fire because it's universal to everywhere. Now, beyond that, if you live in an area that's prone to getting hurricanes, then you need to take steps to prepare there. What does that mean? Well, it might mean having prefabricated boards to board your windows up. And please, for God's sake, use some of these Torx head screws or something like that, something other than you can take off of the Phillips head. If in case you have to bug out and leave your home, at least it's boarded up from looting and damage.
Ah, interesting.
And that's a great tip, Rich. Excellent.
Yeah, and come up with protocols for when and how you'll bug out if you live in one of those zones, whether it's a place like California is prone to wildfires or prone to hurricanes or tornadoes. When are you going to leave? And when you leave, what are you taking with you? Because leading disaster relief efforts, I see people that arrive in shelters for the first time and they're like, what's going to happen to me now? Well, American Red Cross shelters are amazing places. You're going to get physical comfort, you're going to get shelter, you're going to get fed, etc. But you probably won't be able to bring your pets. You sure as heck won't be able to bring firearms because of the American Red Cross's stance on that kind of thing. And familial integrity may be broken down within a shelter. So, and what's your family reunification plan in case you got a daughter that's in college over here, a son that's at work over there, and then you and your wife are bugging out? So a lot of these things, it's you really need to think through them ahead of time because, as I've talked about on our show, the American Red Cross does a great job of breaking things down into blue sky and gray sky. In blue sky environment, the sun is shining, there's no disaster. This is the time to prepare, because under gray sky events, when the weather is turned nasty and people are getting killed, that ain't the time to prepare. The time to prepare is past and the time to execute has arrived. So all hazards preparedness, man, really starts with making sure that you're fit, you're ready to go, your home is ready to go, your vehicle is ready to go, and your family is read in on the script.
Well, and Rich, I'd really like to double down on your family being ready, or again, part of our preparation. I'll just draw the conclusion to those of us, just like you mentioned before, that we train in, self-defense, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, firearms, integrated systems, is that we also put ourselves in scenario-based training. Well, this type of preparedness also includes scenario training, right? So you should be at least cursory rehearsing these plans, right, with your family.
No, absolutely. Scenario-based training is obviously incredibly important, and we did a lot of that with the Red Cross. Obviously, we did a lot of it in the Marine Corps. You were in the Army and still work, I believe, at the Department of Defense in some capacity. So you're well aware that therein, that level of preparation is what's going to turn the tide. I had another thought, but it's completely escaping me now. Maybe it'll come back in a second. I haven't seen your moment.
Not a problem, brother. I mean, what you're laying down is excellent information, as we always expect from you, brother. Yeah, go ahead.
The neurons finally connected here, guys. What I was going to say, buddy, about your point about combatives and jiu-jitsu and things of that nature, I love that, because whereas you can't take your firearm into a shelter, you can take Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Whereas you can't take a firearm or pepper spray into the United Kingdom, you can take jiu-jitsu, because guess what? Gravity and physics applies everywhere. And I hear people that, my wife and I love to travel around the world. We've been doing that for some time now. And a lot of people go, I can't believe you go over there, Rich. You can't take a gun. Like, yeah, you can't take a knife either. But the most dangerous weapon is what's between my ears. And I know people hear that and they probably roll their eyes and go, oh, here we go. But I sincerely mean that, because the more you know, the less you carry. You can have all the sexy kit in the world. And I hate to keep blasting these 19 police officers in the hallway at Uvalde. They had ballistic shields. They had ARs. They had sappy plates on front and back. They had everything they needed but the will to engage that killer. And that's what directly led to the lost lives of those children. So people that get caught up in sexy kit, and I'm on my soapbox, and I promise I'll get off. People that get caught up in sexy kit, I'm not impressed with a lot of it, because if you can have all the crap in the world. If you don't have the will to engage, you're doing nobody any good. Sorry.
Well, Rich, I know this isn't the necessary subject, but I would like to say that I commented on a picture that was in Uvalde, and it kind of hit me hard, and I thought, I saw in this picture, and this is how I phrased it. I see a squad. I see 2 fire teams, 1 maneuver element, and 1 primary team that can absolutely take out 1 shooter. Is it possible that you could have casualties? Absolutely. That is factored into all war engagements and all law enforcement high risk situations, is that you have the possibility of casualties. But man, when I see a squad against 1 person, when there's maneuver capabilities, yeah, it definitely is frustrating to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm on that soapbox again too. But
It's sickening.
I
And
think
it's,
I want to. Yeah, it is. It is, and again, that goes down to proper training and proper support from administrations too. So, Rich, real quick, I think there was another aspect of the fitness element that I want to make sure our audience members understand. The fitness is important for the specific acute situations, but would you not also agree, and I know you agree with this, we've talked about this, but it also will contribute to your capabilities to deal with hardship for long term, right?
yeah, it leads to mental resilience. It leads to physical resilience. The grit that you mentioned earlier. I think it's all the above. And it's one of those things where in the Marine Corps for 23 years, we have to run a physical fitness test during the first half of the year and then a combat fitness test the latter half of the year. And you have to maintain height, weight, and body fat standards. So I really did not realize until I got out of the Marine Corps in my mid 40s just how out of shape America was, because as you know, you live in this bubble of the military where everybody's fit, everybody's mentally capable, everybody's drug free, et cetera, et cetera. Then you get out amongst the general population, you're like, whoa, what's going on here? So I often, when I get this, like, what do I need to do, Rich? Do I need to get this connector for my Glock? No, slow down, Skippy. You need to get your ass in shape, and that's hard for Americans to hear. But really, that's love language, right? Get in shape. And here's the cool thing, you can get in shape and learn jujitsu at the same time, right? It's not one or
Absolutely.
the other, it's both.
Yeah, it's like Cecil Birch always says when people approach him, is like, hey, I think I just want to get in shape before I start jujitsu. And Cecil's like, no, just start and you'll get in shape. I mean, I'm telling you, it's hard for me to pinpoint a better activity for getting in shape overall than jujitsu or some form of wrestling. I'm being sincere in that. It's like you can be the most awesome CrossFitter, and bless those folks that enjoy that. I've done some of that myself and still kind of do some of that in my home gym. But there is nothing, in my opinion, that compares being able to have that ability to move your body in resistance and against another competitive person on a regular basis. It just, again, that's why we espouse that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I was thinking of, we did a show where, because it circles back to something you said earlier in the show, Eric, and that was when we did a show called A Bump in the Night of an incident I had on my farm where I came outside and there was somebody, crawling out from underneath my truck.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that episode. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we did another one with Justin, who's a tremendous CrossFit athlete. And he's also very new into BJJ, or was at that point, where he came out of his garage, same thing, caught somebody trying to break into his car and just body tackled him and held him. It was a 16-year-old, tried to hold him on the ground till the cops showed up, and it took them like 30 minutes to get there. And I juxtaposed those two incidents because Justin never was a cop. He's never, been in those kind of things, and I'm not poo-pooing on him. I'm just stating a fact. As a bouncer or as a cop, when I laid hands on somebody, I could see the look in their eyes like, oh my God, I can't believe somebody's put their hands on me. For me, it's another day at the office. And I don't want to be flippant, but I'm just telling you what it is. I'm going to ask you one time. I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to put my hands on you. I'm not going to be here all day. And the same thing with that guy, the scumbag I caught trying to steal my car. I'm not mad at you, bro. I'm just going to get you off my property. And the point I was trying to say about that defensive firearms use is recorded nowhere. It's recorded. I didn't call the police on that.
Yep.
It's not a
Excellent
statistic,
point.
and yet it happened to me on my property. So these things can and do happen. You need to work scenario training so that you can find out, how do you talk to somebody when something like that happens. Don't let the first time it happens be in the middle of the night with your wife and daughters in the house.
Yeah, if folks out there, we beat this like a dead horse. It's that verbalization, de-escalation, managing unknown contacts. Again, the ShivWorks term is that's probably the most important thing, at least in the near term, that folks need to. And it doesn't take but an afternoon to get exposed to a lot of those principles. Now you got to practice it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a very good point too. How do you just, how do you diffuse, or how do you mitigate? How do you manage those situations? That alone takes practice. And let's face it, how you deal with it can escalate it if you're wrong.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't know how to do it, you can escalate a situation into a physical or worse, lethal situation if you don't have those skills.
Well, I can't help but make this connection, guys, as you're saying that, Eric. And it really hit me hard too when Rich said it earlier, that the situational awareness and the verbalization is not sexy when we like to practice our firearms, right? But man, the same thing with that fire plan. That's not sexy. Even I sit there and think I need to get a new alarm system. I need to, put 3M film on my glass, etc. But you know what? I'll just admit right now, I don't think I have any thoughts on my fire plan other than some smoke detectors. That's just brilliant to me. That's the de-escalation of a disaster preparedness plan.
Yeah.
Well, and with the, go ahead, Rich. Excuse me.
No. I was just going to say, I mean, simple stuff like, your smoke alarm goes off and you sit up in bed. And they have found so many people dead because they sit up in bed, drew in a deep breath of that toxic smoke, and fell dead. So
Oh wow!
again, what do you do when the smoke alarm goes off? You roll off the bed, get on the ground, crawl to the door, check it with the back of your hand, see if it's hot before you start opening doors and running out. And your kids need to know this too, because again, statistically, they're more likely to be in that kind of a fight than a fight for the life of the firearm.
Well, and I'd also, because we're talking on this subject, it's well worth discussing or adding, is that you need to have, absolutely, you should have fire extinguishers throughout your house. And also for folks that live in homes that have second stories or more, possibly, it's a very good decision to have fire ladders as well, so that you can be able to egress out of a window in case that's your only outlet. So yeah, that's something to also think about. But it's one of those things, and I can't help but bring up a historical story about the beginning times within our or the birth of our nation. And I just think it's a cool story about when Benjamin Franklin and his fellow, let's just put them as blue collar workers in the junta. and how those guys were presented with the problem of all the fires within the Philadelphia area, and they came up with the first, in my understanding, the first formal fire department. And again, we're sitting here talking about now how easy it is to have your own fire plans. I think it's pretty cool to see the progression in society. Heck, it was not common even just a decade or two ago that people diligently had fire extinguishers, you know. And I just couldn't help but bring up the junta and Benjamin Franklin.
Well, there's a broader discussion on this as well, and I think it's interesting. We did not ban matches to stop arsons. A 5-year-old, if they have the money, can walk into Walmart and walk out with a book of matches or an assault lighter, a Bic lighter. It's perfectly legal. When I was with the American Red Cross, I led the nation. The state of Tennessee did, my state, in the home fire preparedness campaign. And what we did was we went into low-income neighborhoods. We went to the projects, we went into trailer parks, knocking on doors, me and my teams across the state. Hey, how are you? Do you have smoke alarms? Can we install some for you? Can we work with you on a fire preparedness campaign? And we would sit down and draw a diagram of how to get out of their house, stick it on the refrigerator, and while they were installing smoke alarms. I say that to say I didn't come in and go, I need to have all your lighters. Give me all your matches. I didn't do that. I didn't ban that. I didn't seize those matches and lighters. I came in and said, let me give you preventive measures, right? And I look at that similar to the gun debate. We here's how we got away from and reduce the amount of fires. Number one, to your point, we used to have, right until the Civil War, civilian fire brigades. We got away from that because the way it used to work, I don't know if you guys know this or not, insurance companies paid the civilian fire brigades for every building that they saved. So what ended up happening, human nature did. They would start fires to get paid. So they realized, oh, this is not good, because you had...
Interesting.
Yeah, so we standardized it and somewhat socialized it, and then that the tax dollars were paid for it to stop insurance companies paying these civilian fire brigades. We standardized techniques, tactics, and procedures, and then we focused on prevention, longer prison terms for arsonists, et cetera. What we did not do was ban fire.
Very good point.
It's interesting. Firefighter militias. That's interesting. I've not heard of that.
Yeah. There's an interesting scene on the movie Gangs of New York where these two civilian fire brigades meet and they start fighting each other. They're fighting each other, and it doesn't make sense unless you understand the context. They're fighting each other because they want the payoff from the insurance company that's going to pay for the saving of the building. When they realize, wait a minute, they were here first, boys. Let's go out here and we'll take this building over. And they just start throwing people's crap out. Yeah.
Well, I would like to say if folks haven't seen that movie, that is actually a profound movie that is very much based in some realities that took place in New York. Man, it's an amazing representation of what really took place back then. And again, go ahead, buddy.
No, New York, the first civilian, talk about policing in America right now. Police have no duty to protect you. This goes way back. The first civilian police department was in Boston in 1838, and New York got theirs in 1845. Those were the first two. So prior to that, there was zero organized policing in the United States of America. Nothing until roughly the Civil War. So you're like, well, what the hell did they used to do? Well, every county had a sheriff, and if the sheriff needed somebody, he'd be like, hey, I know those Davis twins have guns and they're well trained. Let me press them into service to do something. So that's where the long precedent of the Second Amendment grants you, the citizen, the right to arm yourself for the purpose of self-defense. The police are just here to enforce the law and reduce crime. I mean, don't believe it from me, folks. Go to the Department of Justice website. The first sentence, the role of law enforcement in America is to reduce or eliminate crime. First sentence, full stop. They're not your bodyguards. You are here to protect you.
Absolutely. Well, Rich, man, we're sitting here at about an hour and a half, so we didn't want to take too much more of your time. It's been an incredible discussion, precisely the way that I envisioned the discussion. On that note, man, it's at some point, we're going to start narrowing down to only a handful of guests for a while, and we can't wait this long to have you back on because you just have such incredible wisdom. You're a blast to hang out with, and we're like minded. So thank you so much for your awesome wisdom this evening. On that note, Aaron, do you want to hit some jovial content here for 5 or so minutes?
Well, maybe some listeners are getting tired of me talking about it, but you might have heard me talk about this, Rich. But I had cataract surgery, and I have perfect vision starting about 3.5 feet away. So I've had to go to 100% red dots. I'm curious, have you started messing around with red dots? And I've talked a little bit in person with Mike Seeklander about it. Just a fun topic for me. Have you gotten into red dots yet?
I'm a fan. I need to put in the reps to where I'm comfortable. I mean, right now, the Glock 26 with a Glock 19 magazine in it that I'm in my waistband does not have a red dot on it. It's got a set of Dawson precision sights on it. Although my Glock 19, that is my self-defense gun for the house, it's got a TLR2 light on it and it has a red dot on it. Because when I wake up at night, I'm not going to have these on. And unless I have glasses on, I can't see the sights as well. So yeah, I think it's the way of the future. I really do. And it's a long answer, but it's just shame on me. I've had a red dot on that Glock 19 for, I don't know, 5 years. I just haven't trained with it enough. I took it to the range over the weekend and put a couple hundred rounds through it, but I'm just still not to the point where I feel comfortable with that presentation being able to pick up the dot quick.
Well, I'm going to kind of tell on Eric a little bit here because I have been working with the red dot and I've become pretty proficient with it. But Eric was behind the game, and then he would kept talking. Literally, Rich sounded just like you. I need to put the reps in. So I honestly, Eric and I hadn't shot together. Eric, I don't remember the last time we shot on the same range other than ECQC, and we know we're not doing regular shooting in ECQC, but I thought Eric was going to show up and be all over the place just because he kept saying he hadn't put the reps in, but he didn't disappoint. He kicked ass.
Awesome.
But it is interesting how especially amazing shooters, really experienced shooters, still feel, oh, I need to really get the reps in. I guess what got me into it was the fact that even before my cataracts, I couldn't see well enough with iron sights. So I had to check out red dots, and it changed my life. But other people that don't have an issue seeing irons may not, be as driven to work it as me. But I was just curious. It was a topic on my mind.
Yeah, and another thing with Eric, you and I had were two straight blue belts for a long time, and I think are you a purple belt yet, or you're getting close, aren't you?
So I'll just say it on the air right now because by the time this airs, it'll be reality. But yeah, my school or my gym, I should say, actually tests for belts. And I used to kind of be a little bit against that until kind of the advent of this huge gravitation towards sports jiu-jitsu. And don't get me wrong, sports jiu-jitsu is awesome. You know, when you're very capable as a sports jiu-jitsu practitioner, you're going to have awesome capabilities on the street. But I think there is that part of getting away from some of the more self-defense aspects. So I think schools that have tests that make sure that they include the self-defense aspect of jiu-jitsu, and my gym even includes Muay Thai striking and clinch, like Greco clinch stuff.
Nice.
So full disclosure, I just did my purple belt test last night, and I am sore tonight. It was a lengthy and pretty tough test, but yes, I am through that test. I'm not promoted yet, but there was hints that may happen tomorrow. So we'll see. We got some guys testing for blue, but yeah, I know there's a long explanation, Rich, but by the time this airs, I probably will have my purple belt.
Well, I don't want to say congratulations in advance, but congratulations in advance. Well deserved. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I just got my third
Thank
stripe,
you.
and it's the journey, man. My son's a 4-stripe white belt. And I know he's chomping at the bit to get his blue. And I'm like, man, just relax and enjoy the process. And he does. I mean, he's obviously very eager. He's a very competitive guy. But yeah, it's as you know, it's a journey, not a destination. And that goes for life in general.
Absolutely. Well, Rich, man, I'm I had on my notes to ask you about your current jiu-jitsu journey, man. Got that third stripe, heading towards the fourth. I mean, we're gonna see you with that purple here soon, which is so cool. I love you. You just hit it on the head. It is a journey, and I'm thinking about the gi I wore last night was my Origin Path gi, and I wore it for a reason. And it's because it is a path. It's a journey. So that's awesome, Rich. And I love seeing your progress as well, brother.
Yeah, I mean, it's old man jiu-jitsu. I mean, I'm in my early 50s, and my game isn't what when I did judo and some other grappling stuff in my 20s. I'm not that guy anymore. It's a lot slower. I'm much more deliberate, not a whole lot of explosiveness or speed, but
you and me both, brother.
Yeah, but it's good, and anybody can do it. If you're hearing us tonight and you haven't taken that plunge, man, I highly encourage you to do it.
Yeah, and Rich, and I had this discussion last night with my training partner Will, who heck, I won't say his last name because I haven't cleared that with him, but we were having that discussion, and he's currently a soldier. I'm a former wrestler, tough dude, man, and man, he's a big dude. So my whole test, when I say big, he's a fit, strong guy. And he actually, I'm sitting there, it's so cool. I'm sitting there watching some texts come in from those guys completing their blue belt test. And it's, yes, it's really cool. Part of the discussion as I see these texts come in about those guys completing their test. And I said to him last night that the most important thing that I did for myself in my jiu-jitsu, because I've mentioned this on the air before, I've been a blue belt for 11 years.
Wow.
Which is plenty of time to get a black belt. Some of it's been my time as a civilian, deploying a lot, changing gyms, moving, all this, that, and the other. Some of it's on me, personal decisions, focusing on shooting, focusing on other things. But a big part of it was injuries, and that is choosing to train correctly and who I train with. I'm quick to tell some folks that may not be as skilled as I am or capable as I am, no, because they don't have control. But sometimes I'll say, okay, man, dealing with new athletic energy is good for me, and I just work on control and kind of cooking the person a little better. But I'm still a little bit more avoidance of that kind of situation these days, and it's kept me healthy. And frankly, it got me to this test finally. Your thoughts on that, Rich?
I couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly right. Every now and then you do need to roll with that spazzy white belt, because that's probably the energy you're going to get from somebody in a parking lot. So I agree with
Good
that.
point.
But on the reg, and I'm very fortunate. Cody Hudson, my jiu-jitsu coach, is a federal law enforcement officer, was a street officer for years, and he teaches. It's an all law enforcement class, so everybody in there is used to defensive tactics. They're used to really rolling with guys on the pavement, and we all want to go to work the next day. So it is a perfect group, which goes back to, I think, something we talked about on the previous show, and that is finding your tribe. And when my son went out to Albuquerque to work at the National Laboratory out there, because he did jiu-jitsu here, he was able to go out there and plug in immediately to another jiu-jitsu family and just be welcomed into the fold and have an immediate group of friends and people to hang out with. So if you're, I say this to the vets that are maybe listening to the show tonight, guys, and that is, if you're feeling a little lost now that you're out, there's a community waiting for you. And that's the jiu-jitsu community or your shooting community,
Yeah.
USPSA, IDPA, whatever you want to do, something that you can plug into, something that you can get a goal, skills that you can develop, people that want to see you improve. And I just highly encourage you to do that.
Well, Rich, man, I think we've kind of ended shows this way before, but man, it is tough not to call that a mic dropping moment, man. Folks need to do that. It's that simple. Is find your tribe, and you'll find like-minded individuals in typical manners similar to us. And man, that's well said, Rich.
Yeah, and you won't believe sometimes how much more enjoyable and fulfilling your life is just by walking in the door.
Yeah, totally agree.
Absolutely.
And and sometimes, again, if it's been a rough day or whatever, and again, in my early 50s, I'm like, man, sometimes I'll sit in the parking lot. I really don't want this. It's one of the gyms, there's no air conditioning. So it's just, if it's 99 degrees outside, it's 110 on the inside. Putting that gi on,
Wow.
I realize it's going to be a challenge. And I've had knee surgeries and shoulder surgeries. So I just like, man, but I have never walked out of there regretting having gone. You know what I mean? I always walk out spiritually, mentally, physically fulfilled. Even when I got my rear end kicked, and it happens a lot, I still thank God I went.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's very fitting. Again, what you hit on is that the mental toughness that happens from a lot of these modalities. Just what you said, I've been there before multiple times through the years. It's like, man, either at the house, it's all comfortable. My wife, my son at the time when he's out of the house now, I think I'd just take a easy night tonight. And then I listen to I think about it. I was like, nah, grab the bag, hit the gym, and you're so much better off. And then your situation, talking about knowing you're going into that 110-degree gym, but you choose to walk in, that is, again, how we talk about all the time, is how you develop a mindset. Mindset's not a verb, to quote Craig Douglas. You got to do tough things, and that hits it on the head for sure. Rich, that's a good example, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm telling you, man. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's been an excellent discussion, guys. Thanks so much for having me on. I loved it.
Awesome time, Rich. I'm so glad we finally did this. We cannot wait too long to have you back on again, because we got a lot of things we hit on tonight. We got to talk further, and we got to talk about these at some point. And I can't show in the picture here, but my HF radio to the side here, we got to talk ham radio at some point. But
yes,
listen, brother, it's been an awesome discussion, man. We've taken enough of your time. You're a blessing to us, Rich. We thank you very much for spending time with us tonight. On that note, Aaron, I'm going to let you close it out. Have a good evening, Rich.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, Rich, thank you very much, buddy. And again, it's amazing having help and support from guys like you and Mike. Again, both of you came on in the very beginning of our show, and so it's awesome to have you back here a few years in. So again, thank you for me, and man, just have a good night, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, love you guys. Be safe out there.
Love you, buddy.
Brother.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.